I'm Andy Shiers. I'm the Chief Operational Officer, QA and Customer Manager at Dyalog. And what I'm going to talk about this morning, a little about what I do at Dyalog and why I've come back, and then moving on to talking a little bit about the way we build and QA Dyalog APL, and I hope this is the main part because it's more interesting, I suspect, some APL that I have discovered over the last 2 years. Those are the features which I either don't think are documented or hidden very well in the documentation, but I thought, cool, that's wonderful. So, I've been using Dyalog APL now for over 25 years, of which about 23 I've been working for the company that produces Dyalog APL. My other specialities are AIX and obviously Windows and Linux, and over the years Dyalog APL has run on Unix and HPUX and System 5 and BSD and Xenix, and I think about 20 different Unixes. I believe John Scholes would tell you there were a couple of episodes where they finished a port to a new version of Unix and the company went out of business the following morning. So we are also the kiss of death for various Unixes. I've also spent the last 20 years or so supporting some major multinational companies specialising in enterprise servers, storage area networks, and enterprise disk arrays, and so on and so forth. So I am not just the Chief Operational Officer, I'm also the Unix man at Dyalog. So I'm responsible for the Dyalog systems. The ones that customers see will be the DSS pages, the forums. I'm also responsible for the internal systems, making sure that they run. I also have responsibility for the help desk and for developing the QA processes and tests. I've been concentrating for the last 2 years more on the processes so that we can improve the regularity with which we run QAs. What may be of interest to people is I'm also significantly involved in determining the order of resolving issues. I am not responsible for arranging the time for solving issues. That is Richard Smith's job as the development manager to allocate time between development and fixing things. Although you might be surprised to learn that whenever any of the developers is sitting there doing not very much, they have learnt that Andy will be around by their desk instantaneously saying, "Would you fix the next bug for me, please?" They really don't like me coming to talk to them these days. So the company has grown and we continue to grow, but we don't want to change our ethos. The way we work, we believe, is really beneficial to everybody. It's good for us, it's good for the customers. We want our customers to be our friends. So any systems we put in place for the future, we want to keep process to a minimum. We do not want to end up in a situation where when you call up, you end up with a call system with 15 different options before you get through to a human being. Well, a Dyalog employee anyway. Okay, so our intention, and this is Karen and me, as we come back to do this stuff, is to keep additional process to a minimum, both for customers and for the employees. So, things that I'm working on at the moment, we are intending to enhance the DSS pages. For the first time, we intend to get to the point where you can download a 64-bit version of Windows APL from our web pages. At the moment, we have to use a slightly archaic method to achieve that. We are also looking at a new patch mechanism, which will run across all platforms. We're thinking about new documentation formats. A very minor detail, for example, is that you can look at all the documentation we provide in PDF format, but it's been formatted for printing. So if you go down multiple pages, then you kind of get a bit seasick as one page is slightly adjusted to the left and the next page is adjusted to the right, and so on and so forth. So we're going to produce a version of the PDFs that has the same margin on every page. And new documentation features. JD yesterday mentioned that for Quad DMX, we intend to have something like dmx.php, which will supply it with the ID of the error that you see, and it will then display the information about the error. That, of course, means that as the developers introduce new items items for DMX, and that may not just be in releases but actually in a patch, then we can update that page so that that page will always be as up to date as the interpreter. We're going to improve the installer, and over the week other presenters will no doubt add to that list if they haven't already. Whether they've necessarily discussed it with me or not is another matter. So Dyalog has a number of websites at the moment. Just very briefly show you them, if this works. So we have the normal Dyalog APL website from whence everything stems. We have the forums. We will be making changes to the forums. Brian Becker and I have a discussion to have on that in the near future. At the moment, the forums do not have an APL tools group section. You're more than welcome to join up for the forums if you have not already done so. We are at the moment suffering from an awful lot of attempts to have spammers join our forums, so I am rather more cynical about attempts to, or requests to join the forums. So if I by accident reject any of your requests, please drop me an email and explain why I've got it wrong.
Will there be a toolkit section soon then? Is that the idea?
Absolutely, yes. Yes. Brian and I would like to have a chat before I fly back to the UK about that. John Scholes has been running the defense area of the Dyalog website for many years. We've now promoted it from being a page on the website to it now being its own subdomain. So now defense.dyalog.com, that's the only change. We have the documentation online. At the moment, it's really just effectively it's the online version of the Windows help files. Again, there we expect to extend that into the future. If there is anyone you want to introduce to the delights of APL, then please point them to tutorial.dyalog.com. This is Gary Bergquist's Zark tutorial. This is effectively the first of the APL as a service applications, if you like, that we have. This actually is running on a very small Linux VM, and the moment that the VM is started up, this application starts, and if it fails, it is automatically restarted. It's running on port 80, so it uses some of the new features we've put into the Unix versions, which allow you to spawn a new process and change the ownership of the process so that only the first part of the binding to the port 80 has to run as with extended permissions. This is exactly how Apache, for example, works. We also have if you like, the summary of the documentation. This actually appears in a Windows release. This page is more up to date, and it points you to the different manuals which you can download, to the tutorials, some internet resources, mainly the ones I've shown you, and the APL wiki, and also shows you the previous version, the documentation for previous versions. And finally, for DSS users, we have the DSS area of the website. I am working on making some changes to this. In particular, and I'll come to that later, actually thinking about it. But from here, you can see recent updates, and we can show you the list of, no, I can't because I disabled the web pages. We can show you that we display the outstanding bugs, the fixes that we have applied, and various other things as well. True. Yes. This is that. Yes, the DSS pages are as Morton says, the only ones that you have to have a support contract for.
Everything else is open to the public. You can browse the forums without actually joining up. It's only if you want to contribute you have to register.
One little detail: if you have tried to use the search engine on the forums, it quite frankly didn't work. Kai was kind enough to point that out to us, and last week or the week before, Jason has put up a revised search engine which seems to work much better. So, builds and QAs. For Dyalog APL 12.1 onwards, we now build and QA for effectively interpreters on Windows, 12 on AIX and 4 on Linux. And the reason for the 4 is that we have both 32 and 64-bit APLs, both classic in Unicode. And on AIX we actually compile specifically for chip technologies. Currently Power 3, Power 5 and Power 6 will drop the Power 3 and put Power 7 in there in the near future. For a set of patches to be made available to the customers, then every single version and edition on a specific platform has to pass QA before it's allowed to be sent out of the building. From 12.1 onwards, we now have a single common source code for all platforms, all editions, so that one change made on one platform will be reflected in all of them. As I mentioned, we issue patches. The patches are made automatically available for the last or latest 3 versions. When 13.1 is released, which we think will be in the first quarter next year,
April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day, we will be releasing version 13.1. At that point, 12.0 will cease to be on automatic update patches. We decided with 13.0, hey, we might as well go the whole hog. 13.0 was released on April the 1st, which I believe was a Friday, wasn't it? So yes, so if you're going to go for it, you might as well do it in style. 12.0 is supported until 13.1 comes out. That is only automatically built and QA'd on Windows. That's effectively when I came into the company and took over. We also build and QA the current development version on all platforms every night as well. The QAs are run on the same QAs run on all platforms. Obviously, the QAs for drawing a GUI object don't work very well. Sorry, Ray.
On your updates, do they come automatically, or is there something I have to do to?
If you have a DSS contract, then you will get an email each time we produce a new set of patches which tells you about them, and then you have to use the patch workspace to apply them. When we first came up with the patch workspace, our good friend Bill said, what you should do is you should put all your software under the program files directory, because that's a nice thing to do. And then he made it so that you had to have administrator privileges to write to that area, which has rather made the patch workspace a little more tricky to use. Do remember, if you use the patch workspace, you must run as administrator, or save the new executable somewhere else and move it into position. So same QAs on all platforms. I am running a project, I have been for about 3 months now, to review all the previous fixes, add additional QAs, look at outstanding issues in the system, find out whether actually duplicates have already been fixed. And as I say, as a result of that, 13.1, we have over 300 new fixes, and there's a goodly number of issues that have now been closed as duplicates. We're also writing some QAs for big memory tests. 13.1 removes the limitation now becomes a 64-bit limitation on workspace and object size. So we are trying to write QAs where the server itself has a workspace size of 96 gigabytes. A plus B is not necessarily very quick when you have a 40 gigabyte object. Running with very, very large objects particularly shows up that we need to improve our performance QAs. And as Morton mentioned before, please feel free to contribute code for that, so that if you can supply some code that reflects the really critical performance parts of your application, then we can make sure that future versions don't slow that down. If you code a particular operation in a particular way, we will try to say we will not slow that down, but we will not guarantee that that will necessarily remain the quickest way of doing it. We may find that if you rewrite your APL code in a different way, we've enhanced that functionality for performance more than we've enhanced the existing one. And for good QAs, we use our own tools within Dyalog. The Conga and the SQAPL ones in particular, as I said, the APL as a service on Linux. Hi, Chris.
A question about QAs. If the same QAs run on all platforms, then it must be purely interpreter QA we have here. Nothing, let's say, in the Windows GUI or anything.
No, what that is, okay, yeah, I'll just start there. There are a certain amount of, if it's Windows, run this GUI, so run this QA, if it's not Windows, don't run it, or so forth. So, but basically what that means is that the QAs push like half of the interpreter run every night on all platforms. If someone reports a, legally speaking, I should probably call it an issue, but I'll call it a bug. We aim to fix bugs by default in the version in which they are reported and subsequent versions. We may choose to put it in a previous version if we consider it important enough. If we consider that a fix is such that we are slightly nervous about it, then we are more likely to postpone it for the development version so that we can test it further. However, none of these rules are written in stone. In future, I'm going to change the emails and the bug lists that appear on the DSS web pages so that they show which fixes have been applied to the development version. Okay? If you feel strongly that you would like a particular fix in an earlier version, please get in contact and we can have a discussion about that. Right, let's do some APL, that's more fun. So let's look at, first of all, some of the stuff that's been in APL for a mighty long time. Okay, pre-Roman may be pushing it a little bit, but there we go. Environment variables. If you use a Unix version of Dyalog APL, environment variables should always be defined in uppercase. So if you have running a Unix version, you can type things such as default underscore div equals 1 and then start APL. And at that point, quad div has a value of 1. You can specify environment variables in Windows versions, either in the registry, where you'll find most of them are already. You can also put them on the target of the shortcut which you use to start APL with. You can run Dyalog APL from scripts. One of the beauties of the Unicode version is I think that's a tad easier to read than that, which effectively is having to do Control-O and Control-N to swap between ASCII and APL mode. But all this says is, in a single shell script, start a copy of Dyalog APL, run get build ID and Apple version, and then come out of APL. You can do it on Windows as well. Here you would just create an input file and redirect the input to dialog.exe from that file and push the output somewhere else. And in this particular case, I've run exactly the same as I did here. I'm getting the build ID and the Apple version for a fairly recent 13.1. In fact, it might even be the most recent. Quad off. Well, I'm not being rude. Quad off is a nil-adic function. However, Dyalog APL has extended in the parser, there's a little trick in there that says that you can follow quad off with a fairly simple expression which basically says terminate APL with a exit code of 11. The standard exit code from Dyalog APL is 0. What I choose to use, I do a quad off 10 to indicate that my application has finished successfully rather than that APL has finished successfully. Well, there's a very bad Unix joke for those who are Unix people. Who am I tells you who you are. Where am I? This will tell you which version of Dyalog APL it is you're running. What platform, and whether it's 32 or classic, 32 or 64, which version of Dyalog APL, including the SVN number. Is it a development version or is it runtime? running on Windows, and that, I think the S stands for server, but no one's ever quite told me what it stands for. Please note that in version 13 we have changed the order of the elements of the version number, and that's because that apparently is much more common. It fits in much better with Windows versioning and indeed Unix versioning as well. If you want to know whether you are running on Unicode, we recommend you use that expression. Am I on a little endian chip or a big endian chip? So is that an Intel chip or an AMD chip, or is that a power chip or a Spark chip? And am I a 32 or a 64-bit interpreter? I have to thank John Scholes for those. 15 minutes. Just a thing to be aware of. Do not branch into the middle of a control structure or jump out of the middle of a control structure using the branch, because APL doesn't know that you have gone over the end or gone in over the beginning of a control structure, and funny things happen at that point, or rather they appear to happen at that point. The one exception is that branching to 0 out of a control structure is perfectly okay, because you're coming out of the function and the control structure is disappearing at that point anyway. Right, so how many people here use that expression to start up the editor on a function or an object? Yeah. You could type quad ed quote name quote. In Windows you can double click on the name and that will open the object. You can use the keystroke that maps to ed, which on Windows is Shift Enter, on Unix is whatever the APL key is you define and enter, or Control E, and if you're using terminal emulator PuTTY, then Shift Enter again will allow you to edit the object that the cursor is currently on. You can redefine ed to be whatever you want, either in the Windows version using the keyboard shortcut configure option, or you can change your translate table. So if you type paren ed name, you end up with a new function with that name, if there's not already an object of that name in your workspace. If you precede a name with one of these characters, then it will open an object up of that type. So if you wish to create a namespace, you type paren ed circle star Andy, and you'll end up with a namespace called Andy. I guess everyone knows this. If you do Alt F and number in the Windows version of Dyalog APL, it will open up, it will effectively do a paren load of the workspace that appears in the MRU list as that number. So Alt F1 will load your most recently loaded workspace. Alt F Shift 1 will X load the workspace, so it doesn't execute the latent expression. Status window outputs on Unix, by default, all the verbose error messages appear in the same place as the APL session, which means your APL session ends up with rubbish written all over it. Well, it's very useful rubbish, but it's still rubbish because it gets in the way. You can redirect those messages using this method of the APL status FD. If you're on Windows, at the moment, if you want to get the contents, the more detailed error messages, then you have to use an expression like this to read the text out of a status window. You cannot alter the contents of the status window, and if the status window is not created, so you haven't actually opened it in any way, then you cannot read the status window. With 13.1 onwards, I think you should start using DMX. This slide is this is how it works. If you disagree with the way this works, please go and have a word with the development team. A scripted object, be that a namespace or a class, is held as the source, which is the text that you can read of that object, and the binary image. The source can only be updated by using quad fix or by fixing the class or namespace in the editor. The binary image if you do a quad fix, will be created at that point. However, the contents of it are updated as functions are run in it, as you create variables in it and such like. But the important thing to remember is that the changes to the binary image are never reflected in the source of the scripted object.
I'm not sure I understand this. What are you talking about? When you come out of a function, it fixes
No,
it?
not a function. This is a namespace or a class.
Okay.
Then when you fix a, let's say, a class at the moment, you end up with one part. There's a blob in the interpreter which is the text which you have written, and there is a tokenized version, a binary image of it. And if you change the binary image, it will never change the text image.
I think the example you should give is that, for example, if somebody adds a variable, you see A is not in the script, and you go into the namespace and you see A is assigned 90, whatever, and your script will not reflect.
Yeah.
The value will be there, but it won't be in your script.
When you fix a script, all of the commands in the script are executed at that point. Okay, and I'll just demonstrate that. I think I've got time. So where are we? So in here we have a class called CL, and if I edit that class, what you can see, it's defining a method or a function called foo. It's creating a variable in the root namespace called Andes, and it's going to create a form. Okay. Now, if I make a change to that class and I fix the class, then somewhere in the background you'll find a form. Okay. It's created that form. It's run that command at the point where you fix the class. The other thing, a little trick that I found, you guys may know it, but I didn't, is that if you create an instance of a class and then you raise the original class, you have a bit of trouble seeing what the source code for that class is. And the expression which you can use for this, to get the source back, so that expression will allow you to see the source of the instance of a class, even if the source class itself has been deleted. So that's some of the stuff that's been in there for a while. A little bit of some of the newer stuff that's come along. We have introduced I-beams in 13.0, 12.1. Please, I suspect a lot of these will not change, but we do reserve the right to change them. In particular, if an I-beam, for example, takes a vector as an argument, please write cover functions to allow the fact we may extend the length of that vector in future. Here's quite a useful little one. 2000 I-beam returns some memory manager statistics. I won't go into many at the moment, other than to say that 2000 I-beam 2 returns the number of compactions in your APL session since you started it. Compactions impact performance. What a compaction does is it squashes everything up to the beginning of the workspace, and that's quite a slow operation. So if you see that you are getting a high number of compactions, where high is a number that I'll leave you to define in your environment, then probably you might need to either increase max WUS to give yourself a bigger workspace size, or you need to do some spring cleaning on the workspace.
There's 0, 1, 2, 3.
And 4 and 5, and I'm just giving.
3 is for garbage,
Yes, it actually goes. It's 5 long at the moment. Yeah, as I say, this is the one that I would be most interested in, would be the 2000 I-beam 2. Right. Idioms are commonly used expressions that the interpreter recognises and give you a significant performance improvement. They are only recognised when the functional script is fixed. So if you load a workspace into a new interpreter which has a new IBeam, your function will not take advantage of that until you refix the function in that new version of the interpreter. The idiom has to appear exactly as it is in the documentation. Any change at all and it will not be picked up. The words say that performance improvements are only for appropriate arguments. I'm not sure I've found an idiom yet where I can even work out a set of arguments that are not appropriate. And in the Windows version in the editor, you can swap the colour schemes dynamically so it will highlight all the idioms that there are in your function. Talking about getting characters into and out of APL, this is where I started with Dyalog APL 25 years ago, and I appear to have come back full circle to talking about character input-output. It is also a bit of a convoluted thing sometimes, but it's necessary. So first of all, syntactic colouring. Unix, you can now have colours to your APL session. Be aware, however, that if you are using, for example, 256 colour definitions, then if you want to pull out that string that I've highlighted at the top, that is 29 bytes long. By the time you've got the colours in there, it's 128 bytes long. So there is a significant overhead on using a lot of colour in your APL sessions. Having said that, here is a version of Dyalog APL, and since everybody else appears to be using Ubuntu at the conference this year, I've chosen to use OpenSUSE. We don't care which Unix distribution you run on. The ones we have tested on are on Ubuntu, OpenSUSE, CentOS, Red Hat and Fedora. If you want to try running on anything else, have a go. If you have problems, let me know and we'll see what we can do about it. So, here is a good old-fashioned Dyalog APL session, Unix session, black on white, and today we're very fortunate that the colours, well, precisely from where I suspect you're standing, there isn't much colour in that, is there? If, on the other hand, I use my translate table, then we end up with a rather more user-friendly colour scheme. And that's Shift-Enter. And there, for those that recognise it, is the function you see in the colour selector under Windows, and that's as close as I can get under Unix. But you can use colour in Dyalog APL on TTY versions, on Unix versions. I'll skip that slide. Basically, that's to define how you define colours. I was asked to do a little bit on how the Unicode IME works, to the extent of how you define the translate tables and the such like, because underneath the covers of the IME there's a good old-fashioned translate table. So when you hit a keystroke on a Windows box running the Unicode IME, then the keystroke is intercepted by the IME DLL, and the IME says, is that keystroke defined in the translate table I have? If it's not, it's passed straight through to the application that you're driving. If it is in there, then it will apply the translation and pass that translated information to the application. So that means that in Dyalog APL, if you hit Shift-Enter, we mean start the editor. If you're using the IME with Notepad, Shift Enter, there is no concept of an editor in there. It will be passed straight through to whatever Notepad chooses to do when it hears Shift Enter. So, down in the depths of program files, Dyalog, Unicode IME, Apple keys, a translate table, there are various ASCII files which you can edit. And that says that Unicode .90, let me do 9014. Unicode .9014, which is IBEAM, is requested, you want it when you hear a control key held down with the I key. If in the translate table you want to have multiple keystrokes for the same one, you merely precede both of them with a comma. Please note that the location of the translate tables depends on the width of the version of Windows and not on the width of the interpreter you're using. So if you have a 64-bit version of Windows and you run a 32-bit version of Dyalog APL, it will still appear in program files and not program files x86. Defns, of course, as ever, is the answer to most of your programming problems in APL. At least that's what John Scholes tells me. And here you can see that Unicode is 2336, which is the hex value, is actually 9014, which we saw as IBEAM. And what you'll actually see in translate tables, when it's encoded to the UTF-8, you'll get the string 226.140.182. So that's how you get between a hexadecimal Unicode point, the decimal equivalent, and the UTF-8 encoding, which is generally what you see in translate tables. If you want to know more about this, here is some information. As you can see, it's a long-winded process to get from the point of hitting a Shift Control, to hit Shift Control I, because I want an IB for it to appear in blue out on the screen. Similarly for Unicode, although that has one less set of translate tables because the Unicode expects Unicode input, and that's the strings such as, in this particular example, 226.140.182. Right. So, for the last few minutes, when it all goes horribly wrong, if Dyalog APL finds an inconsistency in the workspace, it will terminate. Under Windows, it will terminate with a syserror, and under Unix, you'll either get a syserror or a core dump. A syserror usually generates an Apple core file, and it will get dropped by default into your current working directory, and it will be called Apple core. I find that rather unhelpful. What you can do is you can specify an environment variable called APL core name and say what do you want it to be called. The star is a special character, and that is replaced by the lowest possible positive integer that will result in a unique file name. So if you have Apple Core 1, Apple Core 2, you delete Apple Core 1 and syserror again, the new one will be called Apple Core 1. If you get an Apple Core, not all is lost. You may well be able to copy your functions and variables out of the core file. If you use the default file name, please remember to put a full stop at the end of it. We have blood spilt on carpets in the office about this from time to time. That's the way it works. Otherwise it will not find the file. I didn't know this, but then I don't know very much in this life. If you use paren copy to copy either from an Apple Core or a workspace, it copies the object at the global level. If you use quad CY, it copies it at a local level. So if you save a workspace with a suspended function and you copy a local variable, attempt to copy quad CY, a local variable out, you'll get the local, the localized version. If you paren copy it, you would get the global version. Well, syserrors don't always look that nice, particularly on customer sites. So what you can do is you can suppress the syserror dialog box by setting the environment variable or putting a registry entry in, dialog underscore no pop-ups equals 1. On Windows, if you get a core file, what customers often want to know is what is the line of APL code that caused it to go wrong. And if you search in the core file for the that particular string, interesting information, everything below that is apparently of interest, including the APL stack. And at some point in the near future, I'll be putting a workspace or a function up on our website, which will do that for you, so you can dig the information out. On Unix, you can't read the Apple stack for an Apple core yet. We're working on that for 13.1. We have introduced in the last month, I think, a new IBean for Unix only, which allows you to dig an Apple core file from a core file. And on Unix, if you want to see which interpreter has resulted in a core file, you can use that expression. Almost finished. Right, where I'm running slightly late, but then again I started late. If you report problems, we really would appreciate a simple repro. Please send in repros anyway, but a simple repro is that to get fixed quicker, because we spend less time having to work out what's gone wrong. Please always tell us full details of the interpreter. The build ID and the Apple version, is it 32 or 64, is it classic or Unicode? Even if you reported a problem the previous day, please include that information, because you may have applied a new set of patches. If you get an Apple core and a Syserror, click on the copy. If you click on the copy button on the Syserror message box, it will copy the contents of that into the clipboard, so you can merely paste it into an email to us. An Apple core shows us the state of the workspace when the interpreter identified that something had gone wrong. We will do our best to deduce what the problem was. We don't guarantee we'll be able to work it out. So, onwards and upwards. Version 13 is the most tested version of Dyalog APL so far. We've only started. We're going to improve on our performance QAs. We're going to improve on our QAs full stop, the large ones. And help from you guys would be great. If you have little pieces of code you would like us to add to the QAs, either for performance or bits of your application, then please let us know and we'll add them. And always, comments, requests and suggestions are always welcome, either to me or to support. And that's it. Okay, Ed.